Hey everyone, welcome back to the neighborhood. It's your friendly neighborhood reviewer here with inToit Reviews. Today, we're taking a look at the brand new CCA CKX. Lately, CCA has been killing it, and spoiler alert, the CKX is no exception. In fact, it might be their best one yet. That is, if you're looking for a specific kind of presentation. So let's get into it. The CCA CKX is a hybrid IEM, consisting of 6 balanced armatures and a 10mm dynamic driver. Basically, you're paying about $10 a driver in this case, as these retail for about $69.99 at the moment. For the money, these are a steal, both in terms of build and in terms of sound. But we'll get into the sound a bit later. For now, let's talk about the shell. The shell here is metal and it's extremely solid. For their size, these are decently weighty, but they're not really heavy from my point of view. The shape of the shell is very small and really ergonomic. The faceplate is about the size of a teardrop-shaped guitar pick. They sit in and fit my ear canal without issue, and don't feel they even come close to touching my pinna. The nozzle may be slightly above average, but the angle isn't too steep and there is a nice lip to hold onto your tips. The supplied tips are clear star lines, and I actually stuck with these tips for the review, as I did not find them to darken things up too much as they might tend to do on other sets. Uniquely, in this case, I use large star lines. Normally I use mediums as these fit me the best, but this time I had to go up a size to get the right seal and fit here. I'm not really sure if it's the angle of the nozzle on this particular set, or if the tips here run on the slightly smaller side for some reason. The filter here is a metal punch plate, and I know some won't really like this idea, but it will do the job in terms of keeping bits out of the IEMs themselves. The connection at the top of the IEM is a C-pin QDC style connection, which is the same as the ZSX, the C10 Pro X, and a number of other IEMs that I've recently reviewed. So it seems that this connection type is becoming more and more common or more universal, especially among KZ, CCA, and 10 Hi-Fi. The version I was sent by Linsol came with a microphone, and the cable itself felt soft enough and played well enough to use on an everyday basis, but it was prone to tangling here or there. It seems to be of the same variety as the other, newer, clear-type KZ cables and terminates in an angled 3.5mm connector. But, because I preferred to run these balanced using my BTR3K, I mostly used a TripoWin C8 2.5mm balance cable for this review. So, onto the sound. These sound great, especially considering their value. Though the presentation is admittedly somewhat unexpected. What I mean is these are very intimate sounding. They have limited soundstage width, average depth, but above average height to their stage. Sonics sound large in their overall presentation, and they appear to be as if they're mic'd up close. This includes vocals, which are more forward in their nature compared to the rest of the mix. The intimate presentation of the CCA CKX reminds me most of the HD 600 series from Sennheiser, but in this case, sounds mostly occur between your ears and is limited to inside your head. Another way to say this is that there is limited to no expansive quality to the sound signature here, but this is probably the weakest characteristic of this set, and some people may actually prefer this kind of presentation. Separation of sonics also isn't something to write home about, and at times, tracks do come across somewhat cramped or relatively claustrophobic, especially on busier tunes. But other components of imaging were generally excellent. Things layer well, instrument distinction is mostly well defined, instruments are placed accurately, and things generally track well, even if they do so within a confined space. Timbre in the CKX is surprisingly well done, and also very Sennheiser 600 series-like. It's slightly warm, and there's almost no balanced armature tonality going on here. The presentation is relatively natural and consistent with depicted instrumentation. There is some very mild grittiness to some aspects of the treble, but this mostly comes across as airiness or ordinary natural harshness for the listener. For example, the top end of cymbals do crash a bit, but I generally found that this adds to the detailing and was never really unpleasant to listen to. In general, the treble is well controlled by the included KZ Starline tips, but can edge towards aggression if one switches to alternative tips. For this reason, I mostly prefer the included clear Starline tips here, but found the treble extension to be well implemented, mildly airy, and to contribute to the detailed orientation and revealing nature of this set. In fact, I will draw one's attention to the circumstance that clarity and resolution are great for the price for this earphone. Furthermore, I've heard sets twice this price that aren't as resolving as the CKX is. Detailing is well above average, and peripheral details are just as clear as the rest. Yet, the CKX's balanced armatures are somewhat sensitive to higher output impedances, so I did observe background hiss and interference on higher output devices. But given that this set has a large number of balanced armatures, I mostly expected this outcome, as BAs tend to be fairly sensitive in this respect. On the Goldnote DS10, I had to use an iFi IE match in Ultra mode to get the darkest background for this set, and it's worth pointing out that I rarely have to push this switch beyond the high position in most circumstances. But, aside from its sensitivity to hiss, I did not find it to be relatively source dependent otherwise. But now, let's talk about the rest of the sound profile. Of particular note, the bass has good articulation and detail to it as well. It really digs deep at times, and it reminds me of a theater system on occasion when the bass flutter on a song lingers in a satisfying yet natural way. So while decay in general was sufficient, bass decay was most excellent. A certain other reviewer, who shall not be named, loves to talk about kick drums during his reviews of bloated mid-bass champions, but here, with the CCA CKX, kick drums sound much more natural, and although emphasized, are generally never overcooked. This is because much of the CKX's bass authority is derived from the sub-bass and low bass regions, instead of relying on mid-bass forwardness. The CKX is bass elevated though, and with some intensity to it at times however, but this for the most part only occurs when it is called for on specific tracks or from particular genres. As there is tremendous impact at times, this would be a good set for people who value an authoritative low-end push in genres such as hip-hop music, pop, rap, rock, or EDM. Microdynamics were stellar, and macrodynamics sufficiently above average for the price. So the bass is pretty punchy when called for, especially in bass-centric music. But the bass here can stay out of the way for other songs, and in this case, it merely adds body rather than bloat to a track. Like the bass, the mid-range is generally presented in a clear and forward fashion, but not overly so. The lower mid-range is somewhat less forward in comparison to the middle and upper mid-range frequencies, but to my ear, this is somewhat a mid-centric set, which is a surprise for a CCA, but a most welcome one to my ears. In this price range, the biggest competition here might be the 10 Hi-Fi T4 or the Moondrop Starfield. Compared to the T4 will have better separation and a wider soundstage, but the CKX has more low-end presence and a better detail retrieval overall. Compared to the Moondrop Starfield, there's less treble glare, additional air, and a tighter, less bloomy, more articulate low-end presentation in the CKX. The Starfield and the CKX share some staging characteristics in that they are both limited in this regard, but the CKX is better in just about every other way. So to wrap things up, the CKX is an intimate IEM that reminds me of an HD 600 series headphone in a number of ways, including its restricted soundstage, accurate tonality, resolving clarity, and vocal and mid-forward nature, but also with the welcomed addition of some much-needed air. Like a 58X or a 660S, it lacks some separation, but has a more articulate and impactful bass, more like the newer 560S from Sennheiser. Yet, in this case, things are even more extended and improved in the bass department. Within the price range, these are actually quite excellent, and surprising that they come from a company like CCA, which is a sub-brand of KZ. I suspect that these will be an extremely popular earphone due in part to its sound, its size, its build, and its comfort. And just a reminder guys, we've recently passed the 1.1k subscriber mark, and I really appreciate you all for helping me get there. But if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell to get future content from me. Another way that you can help the channel out is by becoming a Patreon. The Patreon is only $1.50 a month, and it will get you access to early written reviews. So if you want to be the first to the party, make sure to consider that as well. And with that, I'm out for now.